All right, welcome back for the episode of This Week in Charts via Carnival Trades and Wall Street from Main Street. If you're not done so already, please give the video a thumbs up, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Come find Jason on Patreon. Come find me on carnivaltrades.com for swing trading alerts and analysis. Anyways, let's get into it this week here. So markets, we had the CPI number earlier this week, and markets, that was enough for the market to push up here. That number came in right at around 3.1%. And that was essentially what the consensus was. Now, last month was, I believe, 4.1. So essentially, we had a 25% drop in CPI. And markets obviously rejoicing in that. Again, if you haven't taken a look yet, go check out the interview Jason and I did on his channel, the mid-year recap, where we kind of break down that number. A lot of that continuing, but the CPI number, a lot of that continuing to come from energy. Really almost all of it the last couple of months, or at least the vast majority. And we'll talk about that when we get into crude here in a minute. But either way, right now, short term, the markets are liking that here. Again, it does mean, effectively, at least it indicates to the Federal Reserve that inflation is coming down. Obviously, there's a lot more to that. And, I don't think most of the viewers of this channel would really buy that, but that's what the markets are looking at right now. And here we go. So if we take a look, we talked about the 75% retraced last week on the spiders, and we just go to the all-time high here to the October low, and you can see that got hit. So, we did pierce it a little bit. That's very common here. If you use the SPX, it kind of takes away those dividends, so it's a little bit more accurate. But either way, you can see we went up into this pivot. We talked about that. We talked about the 7.5 retrace. And, essentially we closed right there, right? So almost pretty much right on it to the penny of that 4,500 number, 4,505 was the close at the end of the week. A couple of gap ups. And market really just kind of in, almost I would say kind of a euphoria mode here, where we have, gap and go type days, gap, parabolic move. So markets are holding up. We talked about this last week. We're starting to get a little stretched here, especially on the short term. If you look at I know I don't show you guys this very often in here, but the Bollinger Bands, completely outside of the BB there on the daily, and the triple Qs also last 2 days have been completely outside of the BB there. So a little stretched here in the short term. We are going into an options expiration week next week, so we may get some backing and filling. We may get some pulling, some pulling back here. We also have earnings, some big tech names starting to come out, Tesla, and then I believe next week we've got the Microsofts and the Googles of the world here. I believe Netflix also reports on Wednesday, so that may be a catalyst for some some profit taking. Who knows here? I can never predict what stocks are going to do on earnings, but there will be some market moving events here this week. Again, options X2. When you get a little stretch there, sometimes retail gets a little excited with calls, and you can get some some backing and filling, maybe some more pulling back here. But right now, ultimately, the trend is still intact. Nothing's really broken. If we flip back over to the SPX here, you're going to see you have a couple of trend lines, 3 of them that are important to me right now. One is very steep. I expect this to break at some point. I mean, it's just too steep. Eventually, you're gonna have to break this. And again, that's basically coinciding with the 20 moving average as well. So if you take that out, on any sort of pullback, your next trend line takes you right to essentially that 50 moving average. So we've got some pretty clear areas here, upsloping trend lines here of support on the SPX if we were to pull back a little bit further here. And then of course the big one here, that one will eventually get touched. It's just a matter of, do we start to correct now, or is that later in the summer after one more thrust up, possibly to the 4,600 handle, which would take you to this big pivot here that we hit in March of last year. So lots of levels here to watch. Right now, it'll be important to see, do we close the week above, this pivot high? If that happens, then I think you give the market possibly the upside bias to that 4,600 handle rather. But if we break this trend line, we break the 20 moving average, it's possible you could see some further downside into this trend line and that 50 moving average respectively. So those pretty clear cut levels here, all things considered, for the market. And again, you can kind of see the same thing on the triple Qs here. We went right up into that 380 level, pivot low, little bit of a chop kind of breakdown area. And then you can see we kind of, if we zoom in here, we back tested it right there, we closed above it, and then we came right back down. So good level there. And you can see we pierced through it On Friday, like I said, we were really extended here on the short term. I mean, way outside of the Bollinger Band there, which, that's normal for, a tech stock, but for the entire index, it's pretty stretched. And you can see on Friday, we did pull back in with a little bit of an uptick in volume. So maybe some selling going on there. Again, same areas though, right? 20 moving average. It's going, perfectly coinciding pretty much with this upsloping trend line. And then we have another trend line right here going back to the March lows that kind of coincides with that 50 MA, and then the big one going down to the December lows. So pretty simple there for the Qs as well. Those are the levels that we're watching. If you do close above this pivot high here, then it's, doors open essentially to 390. I just think we have to do a lot of backing and filling here before making any sort of move. Again, market's really stretched, and again, going into an OPEX week, it does. Usually anything that's really pumped up into OPEX week kind of comes back down to earth. But right now here, no real problems with the market until proven otherwise. Russell 2000 here. So again, we talked about that 192 area. We did pierce that by a little bit this week. So we got all the way up to 193.69, but we did close back below 192. And what's more important to me is on the weekly, you went up into that 100 moving average and pulled back, but this area right here, I'll just draw that in so we can all see it. So that's going to be 191.74. We did close below that on a weekly close, and that is important to me because you've got a big, weekly candle sell bar. That's a breakdown bar, right? You had a bull flag here, inside bar on the Russell. It failed, and they did defend that on Friday's close. So Russell 2000 still, I know a lot of people are looking for small caps to catch up here, but this to me says that it's not quite ready yet if it's going to happen. But you need to get above that red bar high in a weekly close, and we did not. But all things considered, the Russell got a little bit of a bid here, and obviously it did come back in on Friday, and they defended that level. The Dow here, that's been struggling as of late because UNH, the biggest component, has been putting it under a lot of pressure. But UNH reported earnings Friday, and the stock had a really nice reaction, up 7.25. That's a huge move for UNH, by the way. And the Dow held up here again. We talked about this pivot high, 345.73. And right now, we went up there and hammered on it. If this consolidates here sideways and flags up, this can push higher, maybe even pierce double top and up to that whole round number on at 350. If you take out these pivots down here at the lows, then again, it's down to 331.45. So easy levels there for the Dow. SMH here, that did back off a little bit on Friday. That did make a new all-time high, though. So you can see right here, high was 160.70. I believe the previous high was right here, 159.41. So just a new nominal high, no new closing high for the SMH. It did come in. Take a look at NVIDIA. This actually had some little bit of a reversal. Take a look at where it was this, actually not this morning, but Friday morning. Big gap and go. A lot of people, I saw my Twitter feed. Everybody's like NVIDIA 500 calls by calls. And it got reversed pretty good on volume there. So definitely some profit taking, 77 million shares. Again, when things are really, really, really overbought like this going into an OPEX week, I generally want to give it the downside bias. That doesn't mean it can't go higher. There's no, maybe it does go tag 500, but I do think it got a little long in the tooth there in the short term. But NVIDIA coming in, obviously that helped pull down the SMH. AMD also coming in as well, closing back below 117. This is the area where you broke down from. Tried to get above that, and that did come in. I do think AMD has put in some type of an interim top here, but not so much, too important to the entire sector, but it is a big leading semiconductor though. But anyways, SMH making a new nominal high, no new closing high, and it did pull back. If it does continue to come down, 150 is to level to watch. IGV here, that's been holding up well, and you got a nice breakout here on IGV. I thought it would have had to do more consolidation here, but it had a nice pop, little inside bar pattern, nothing terrible, and then you close above this pivot. So next level is this weekly high, 367.22. It's not that far away. Really, all things considered, only about 9-10 points, but strong close there on IGV, and that's been holding up really well. Dow Transports here, that did back off of the 16,000 handle. So we did close, again, the week above this area. We talked about that last week. Or excuse me, no, we didn't do that last week. We did that this week, though. So let me check that. But you can see here, your breakdown area, you had a great inside bar pattern that failed. We back tested it. We back tested it here, and then it came back in with a higher low, and we closed above it. Now, we did not close above this pivot here, 15,888. Very close, but again, it's a little stretched here. You know, he basically went from 14,000 to 16,000 in, you know, 3-4 weeks. So transport's a little short-term overbought. We did get some earnings. Delta reported that had a little bit of a gap and crap on Thursday. That is, you know, really strong. Again, Delta's not a tech stock, right? You know, so to go from 33 to 50, again, in, you know, 6 weeks or so, that's a big move there. But either way, and I think we have some more. I think CSX and JB Hunt, some of the trucking names, rail names, start to report this week as well. But transport's holding up again. A weekly close above this pivot can get you back up to, we'll just call it 16.5 for now. But transport's holding up for now. All right. Anyways, let's get over to interest rates here. So let me just bear with me for 1 second. Okay, so here we go, and we'll pull up the 2-year. As always, so 2-year did pull back again with the CPI number coming in. It wasn't really cold, but it was essentially, you know, came in as expected. We did pull back, but guess what? We came right down into this pivot 460 area, and we got a nice bid off of that. So I don't really see any problem with yields here. The market doesn't need to care about yields going up right now unless we break above 5.08. Which is your effective funds rate. The Fed should continue to hike at the next meeting just because they said they were going to. So I think that they're going to want credibility there. Even though we've gotten favorable data, or at least quote unquote favorable data. But right now, yields are holding up. I don't see any issues. 5-year closed the week back above 4% after retesting it. 10-year here, back tested this trend line, then closed back above it. This can still do backing and filling, but I don't expect yields to go all that much lower, even if they do continue to correct a little bit. There's the 30-year. It did close back below 4%, but it got a nice bid off those moving averages. So yield's still holding up. But again, remember, Fed funds rate, that's the real kicker there. If that, you know, if the 2-year starts to really take off, then the Fed has a problem. And that's probably why they're going to hike again, because it got very close. It actually briefly eclipsed the Fed funds rate there, so they want to stay ahead of that. I do expect them to hike, obviously, in June. Anyways, over to housing. XHB and ITB both holding up really well. XHB should pierce double top at this point. It's really not that far away. It's only about 3 points away. Close at 83.50. Your double top is 86.61. ITB still at new all-time highs. That's just look at this massive candle there. Maybe that's a blow-off move. I'm not sure. But right now, there's nothing to say that they can't go higher here. And yeah, really stretched, really overbought. But you know, you can't. I can't say it can't go higher here when you're making new highs and the trend is up. VNQ, that got a nice bid. So finally, we got above 84 on a weekly close. So we've been talking about this for months, and it's just been in this range. And we finally got about, and he closed the week above the 50 MA too. You have higher lows, so that's a sign of strength. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right now, you're just kind of into this trend line here on the weekly, and we'll see how it reacts to that. So it might need to go back check 84. If you fail that back test, then I think VNQ is in trouble. But right now, no real problems. This can still trade up a little bit, and definitely an improvement there for the real estate, for the REITs there. All right, XLF. So we had some bank earnings Friday, and obviously a lot of them, specifically JP Morgan, doing well. It makes it easier when, you know, basically you get to buy these regional banks for nothing. But we did have a little bit of a gap in crap, and I think a lot of that had to do with kind of the conference call here. They're kind of, you know, the market's starting to look at commercial real estate as being a thing here. Take a look at Citigroup. That gapped up all the way to 48.63 and closed all the way down at 45.75. So a really good fade there. Morgan Stanley, the same thing. Goldman, same thing. Wells Fargo got all the way up to 45 and change before closing negative. So a little bit of weakness. JPM did close green. That one is obviously by far the strongest. That's the only one I would even look to own at this point. But a little bit of a gap and crap there on the fins and XLF. We told you for 34.50 would be a level. It was. There's our trend line there on the weekly. So we're still inside of this kind of, you could still make a case this is just bearish consolidation to this big down move. So still not in love with fins here, but you know, they're shaping up a little bit better, but definitely weak earnings on Friday. KRE tested the 100-day moving average, came back in as well. I don't love the regionals. KBE, same thing. Although the KBE could potentially, if this can curl back up and close above this area, could put in a little inverse head and shoulder on the weekly. So we'll continue to watch for that. So something to watch, but nothing concrete just yet. Broker dealers got to 490. Been talking about that for several weeks now, and it pulled back there. If this consolidates, it can go to 500. So no problems. All right, over to energy here. So crude, I want to talk about a little bit about the CPI. I do touch it a little bit in the podcast on Friday, so go check that out. But essentially, we've had a nice move off the lows. So 67 to 70, 10 points, right? A little bit of a pullback on Friday. We hit the 200 moving average. We hit this trend line here. I know there's a lot of trend lines right now, but this one here. But if you look at the CPI, a lot of the vast majority of the reason why it's come down is because energy. Core inflation has basically been flat. It came down 2 points, 0.02%, but it's still at 4.8, which is a 30-year high. Last year at this time, look at where crude was, look where it is now. And the only reason it's gone down is because they've drained that SPR. If crude starts to break through these areas here and starts to move higher, that year over year CPI is going to stick. If we look at nat gas, look at where nat gas was a year ago, 750, and then it went up to 9, and then look at how far down it came. So it's going to be a lot harder for that CPI to crash here with these energy prices. And you can see nat gas here starting to curl back up. You're inside of this little channel here. You have higher lows now. I think the lows, like I've said, are in on nat gas. By the way, Warren Buffett now in on LNG as well. I just purchased a terminal from Dominion Energy, I believe. But so energy here, if this starts to even just base or put in higher lows and continue to push up, which I do believe it's going to do in the second half of the year, like we talked about, you're going to see that CPI number be a lot harder to beat. But crude here still has to get through 77. Nice 200 MA trend line. This trend line right here is a weekly red bar high. So if you close above that, crude can go higher. It can get up to 82.72. But right now it is pulling back there, and nothing has changed right now. However, energy stocks, XLE not so much. I'm not in love with XLE yet, although we have some earnings coming up, so we'll see what we get. But you got to get above 85.08 on a weekly close to negate this. So you're inside of this red bar, big red bar, just kind of chopping inside of that. So I'm not in love with XLE here yet. However, XOP is much better. You broke out of this little wedge. All right, so there's your kind of little wedge there. We broke out. We did pull back pretty sharply on Friday, and we'll see what kind of pattern we get here, but it is shaping up a little bit better. And then the OIH, I am actually bullish on. So this is into resistance. Don't chase it up here. Let it pull back. Let it consolidate, but this is going a lot higher. Really, Schlumberger doing that deal was the big catalyst, that deal with Petrobras. But OIH holding up really well. I do like this. I'm looking to get in. And energy, I believe, in the second half of the year in general, is going to be a trade that you're going to want to be in. All right, let's get over here. So we just talked briefly about nat gas, but I'll just cover really quick here. So again, still inside of this channel, up move. I like what it's doing on the weekly here. Big green bar, and then just kind of flagging there on the weekly. So if you kind of curl back up, this is going to have a nice up move here. But nat gas, it's taken a while, but this is kind of how these bottoms get put in. Again, if you look historically, this is kind of what it does, right? It goes down, it has these big moves, and then goes down, and it bases, and then it curls back up. And once it gets going, it really starts to take off. You can see same, very much reminds me of 2020 here too, where you just went flat, and then you had this big up move afterwards. So, but nat gas holding up there. Dollar index we'll get over to. Actually, let's go to, let's stick with energy here. We'll go to CCJ first. Again, nothing's changed here. We had a little thrust pulled back on Friday. Nothing more than, I like this little breakout here. Nothing more than weekly, monthly consolidation on these uranium plays. URNM. Again, I like the weekly. I like we closed above that green bar, and now we're just kind of pulling back here and flagging. This is shaping up okay. I don't see really any issues with uranium. Potash names, MOS. Would prefer to see this get going here. You had a nice little weekly pop and then an inside bar and another pop. I want to see this get up here, up to that $40 handle. But nothing wrong with the daily either. A little inside bar there. We'll see if that can get to curling back up. Intrepid is still into some resistance. That can still go higher if it consolidates. And NTR is the strongest of the bunch here. That I could still see getting to 65, maybe 70, but that pattern is a little bit better. Okay, now we'll get over here to the dollar. So DXY, that had a bit of a breakdown here. I think there was a chart here, it was like right here, but somebody posted, you know, Yellen lands in China, and it was like pointing to right here. I think it was Monday or Tuesday, and all of a sudden the dollar collapses. Maybe something happened there. I don't know. But right now we know that lots of other central banks are hiking. Bank of New Zealand, ECB, Bank of Canada. That's putting pressure on the DXY. That is my kind of story here. I know the yen is losing value versus the dollar here, but when you have all the rest of them kind of weighing down, that's what's going on. This is going to be inflationary. If the dollar continues to go lower, it's just going to transfer the inflation from one country to another. So we'll watch that, but I think it gets a psychological bounce at 100, which is where we are. So next week, maybe it gets a pop to 102. But if it doesn't get defended here, it's going to go, you know, you've got some support really every $2 increment, 98, 96, 94. Those are going to be the big levels. And if we look on a weekly, you see that 200-week moving average right in that area there. So dollar index definitely soft and definitely had a bit of a rollover in the last week. Gold and precious metals got a bid, as you'd expect. Gold's still nothing crazy here. Still into resistance at 1970. I think you're going to have to consolidate if you want to get through this. But it did shape up a little bit better here. I don't really have a bias here in either direction right now on gold. But it's holding up and it got a pop. Silver was really the big one. I've been telling you guys I like silver more than gold. And it got a really big bid Wednesday, Thursday. We'll have to wait on pattern here. I got probably dozens of messages on this. You know, people asking me, can we buy silver? We need to buy. So did we miss the move? I don't think we missed the move. And even if we did, you just wait on pattern. You know, everything will always give you an entry point, right? So I remember back in 2020, people were, you know, freaking out because gold was moving up. They're like, "Oh, we're gonna miss the move. We're gonna miss the move." You just got to chase it and look at where it is. You know, it's sideways right now. In fact, it went all the way down to 1600. So don't chase. The market will always give you an opportunity. Doesn't mean you're always going to get the exact low, but right now we'll have to watch on pattern. If this holds up, it consolidates, it's probably going to want to go higher. So, but we'll watch that for pattern and just be patient with it. Platinum here getting a bit as well. That can still get to 1,000, but you may have a little bit of resistance there at 990. Again, there's your little green bar pivot, and you know we kind of stalled out there on Friday. Well, we'll see what kind of pattern this one puts in as well. I still think this can have one more push down, but we'll watch that. Palladium, I'm still looking for one more little push. I'd love to get that below 1100. And copper here also got a nice bid here. And you know, again, this is funny, right? CPI, inflation's coming down, right? They tell us that. But why is copper getting a bid? Why is silver getting a bid? Why is crude getting a bid all the last couple of weeks? Seems to be a little conflicting there. But either way, copper here, nice pop. This can get to 4 right now. I still think it has one more drop in it though, but in the short term, it's holding up okay, and we'll just leave it at that. All right. Lastly, over to Bitcoin again, as always. So we did have a lot of news here. Ripple was up about 100. I think it was up 100%. They got a favorable SEC ruling, and take a look at right where it went, right into that breakdown area from before. So anybody who was a seller, anybody who was a buyer here, looking for a move up, and they've been holding. They're exiting. That's why it stalled out there. But big move there on Ripple. So alts got a bid. Bitcoin got a huge pop on Thursday and then came right back in on Friday. So nothing there, not breaking out. Again, to go back to the Bitcoin equities, Marathon, Riot, MSTR, these all had huge bids last week. They did come in a little bit on Friday, but Bitcoin's not moving with them. It is a little suspicious. However, at the same time, you look at this weekly time frame, I mean, that's about as clean of a pattern as you're going to get, right? So green bar, 1, 2, 3 pullback, that's a bull flag on the weekly. So that is set up for a move here. I want to see how this reacts at 32.5 to 33,000. But right now, no problems with Bitcoin, although it is a little strange to me that it's not running with all these other, with the alts and with the Bitcoin mining stocks. So, but either way, Bitcoin hanging in there, okay. I don't see any issues right now. If you were to break below, let's go back to the weekly here. I mean, you'd have to really, yeah, you'd have to break all the way back below 26,331 spot 93 on a weekly close to negate this green bar. But short term, if you get back below 28, we'll just say 28.5, that would be a red flag. It wouldn't break it, but it would be a red flag. But right now, no real problems on Bitcoin. We'll just leave it at that. All right. Lastly, back over to the SPX here. Again, watch next week. Really stretched short term, just gap, 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 gap. Watch this trend line. If we take that out, you know, you can go down here. So those are some levels to possibly watch. Further upside, you close the week above this high, and you can go to 4,600. Really that simple. Anyways, guys, gonna wrap it up here. You guys take care. Come find Jason on Patreon. Come find me on conovertrades.com. I'll talk to you guys all next week.